She openly mocked me in front of everyone at the gathering, sneering about how I was just an admin, as if my job was something to be ashamed of. I bit my tongue, trying to laugh it off, but then her fiancé, clearly curious, turned to me and politely asked what I actually did for a living. The look on her face when I answered truthfully was priceless, because my role was far more important and successful than she had ever let on. Imagine spending years, decades even, hiding the biggest triumph of your life, not because you were ashamed, but because you knew it would somehow be twisted, overshadowed, or worse, used against you. Then, one night, at the absolute worst possible moment, your sister's engagement party, that secret explodes, tearing apart everything your family thought they knew, and exposing a dynamic so broken, it makes you question every single relationship you've ever had. From the moment I, Abby, joined the mock trial team in high school, I was hooked. It felt like I'd found my purpose, my passion. Law. So, when I announced after college that I was going to law school, I expected a celebration. But my parents' response? It was lukewarm, at best. Law school is expensive, honey, my dad cautioned, his voice thick with what felt like a sigh. And it's such a competitive field. It was a stark contrast to the unrestrained enthusiasm that met Hannah's decision to pursue a master's degree in marketing. There were no concerns about competition, no warnings about costs for her. It was always like that. This pattern, this subtle favoritism, it just continued into our adult lives. Hannah would always be the one to share these perfectly embellished stories of her professional successes, stories that seemed to grow grander with each retelling. Meanwhile, I kept quiet about mine. It wasn't that I wasn't proud of my work, I absolutely was. But after years of having my achievements consistently minimized, constantly feeling like I was less than, I'd learned it was just easier to fly under the radar. It was a coping mechanism, a way to protect myself from the inevitable disappointment. The whole administrative assistant misunderstanding? That happened about 3 years ago. I just passed the bar, a massive, monumental achievement, and I was working as a clerk for Judge Thompson. It was incredibly valuable experience, exactly what I needed before applying for a position with the district attorney's office. At a family Thanksgiving dinner, someone asked about my job. I mentioned very casually that I was assisting Judge Thompson. My Aunt Sandra, God bless her, immediately assumed I meant assistant, in the secretary sense. And before I could even open my mouth to clarify, Hannah, my sister, swooped in. That's right. Abby's answering phones and making coffee for some judge, she said, her voice dripping with that cloying sweetness, a smile on her face that never quite reached her eyes. But we all have to start somewhere, right? God, that dismissive comment stung. It truly did. But something stopped me from correcting her. Maybe it was just exhaustion, you know? Years and years of having my accomplishments diminished, of feeling like I always had to fight for an inch of recognition. Or maybe, just maybe, a small, petty part of me wanted to see how long it would take for anyone in my family, to actually ask about my career directly, to show genuine interest. So I said nothing. And just like that, the misunderstanding solidified. It became accepted fact. And I let it. What my family didn't know, what they had absolutely no idea about, was that I hadn't just excelled, I'd soared beyond anyone's expectations. After my clerkship, I spent 5 grueling but incredibly rewarding years as a prosecutor. 5 years with a near-perfect conviction rate. My reputation for being fair but incredibly tough earned me respect throughout the entire legal community. When Judge Thompson, my mentor, finally retired, he didn't hesitate. He personally recommended me as his replacement. And at just 30 years old, I became the youngest judge appointed to the district court in 5 decades. A fact, by the way, that was reported in legal journals and actual newspapers, but was, of course, never, ever mentioned at our family gatherings. For 2 long years, I'd kept my true position quiet, telling myself it didn't matter what my family thought. It really shouldn't, right? But deep down, the little girl who had so desperately craved her parents' approval? She still existed. Sometimes, I'd imagine revealing the truth at a family dinner, picturing their shocked, wide-eyed faces. But I never did. Not until Hannah's engagement party. That's when everything changed. Hannah's engagement party was exactly what I'd expected, and then some. Extravagant. Meticulously, painstakingly planned. Designed, truly, to showcase her perfect, glittering life. My parents had transformed their colonial home into something straight out of a Pinterest dream board. Twinkling lights, floral arrangements that cost more than my rent, professional catering, the whole 9 yards. A huge banner, "Congratulations, Hannah and Nathan," hung dramatically over the entrance to the backyard. I arrived early, partly out of obligation to my mom, partly because arriving with the crowd meant facing Hannah's inevitable, grand entrance. "Oh, Abby, you're here," my mother said, barely glancing at me as she fussed with the flower arrangement, her voice a little distracted. "Can you help set up the drink station? Hannah wants everything perfect when Nathan's parents arrive." My father was just as busy, balancing precariously on a ladder, hanging even more string lights in the oak trees. "Hannah thinks it'll look more magical when the sun sets," he explained, sweat beading on his forehead. I just nodded, setting up crystal glasses, arranging bottles of expensive champagne. This was typical. Even at events celebrating her, Hannah somehow managed to maintain absolute control over every single detail. As guests started to trickle in, I retreated to a quiet corner near the garden, nursing a glass of champagne. Relatives I hadn't seen in months greeted me with the usual, painfully familiar questions. "Still working as a secretary, Abby?" Uncle Frank asked, patting my shoulder, his voice gentle but laced with pity. "Nothing wrong with honest work. Admin assistant," I corrected automatically, the lie having become second nature, a reflex. Aunt Patricia squeezed my arm, her expression oozing sympathy. "Don't worry, dear. Not everyone can have Hannah's drive. You'll find your path eventually." I was 32 years old, with a career most people would kill for, a career that commanded immense respect, yet family gatherings always made me feel like an underachieving teenager. It was infuriating. Then, precisely at 6 p.m., a sleek black BMW pulled into the driveway. Hannah had arrived. With her fiancé. I'd never officially met Nathan Carter, but I knew of him. He was a highly respected defense attorney. And yeah, he'd argued several cases in my courtroom. Though, to be fair, we'd never been formally introduced. I always conducted my court in a full robe, my hair pulled back severely, so I doubted he'd recognize me in a cocktail dress with my hair down. Hannah made her entrance like a queen holding court. She was absolutely stunning in an expensive designer dress, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she waved her left hand dramatically with every single gesture. Nathan walked beside her, tall and handsome in a tailored suit, smiling politely as Hannah introduced him around. He seemed pleasant, if a little reserved, especially compared to my sister's sheer exuberance. "Mom! Dad!" Hannah exclaimed, embracing our parents, her voice a little too loud. "Everything looks amazing, though I think those flowers should be moved to the center table." Without waiting for a response, she turned to the gathering crowd, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "Everyone, this is my fiancé, Nathan Carter. Youngest partner at Harding, Powell, and Williams." Nathan looked slightly embarrassed by this introduction, a faint blush on his cheeks. "It's wonderful to meet Hannah's family," he said warmly. "She talks about you all constantly." Hannah, of course, just continued, parading Nathan around, highlighting his credentials to everyone they met. "Nathan just won a massive case against Bradford Pharmaceuticals," she told our grandparents. "The partners are talking about naming him to the executive committee." I just sipped my champagne, content, for the moment, to observe from the periphery. My cousin Jessica sidled up beside me. She was the only family member who knew the truth about my career. We'd been close since childhood, and she'd actually attended my swearing-in ceremony. "How's Her Honor this evening?" she whispered, a mischievous glint in her eye. I smiled gratefully. "Enjoying the show." "How long before Hannah mentions Nathan's Harvard Law degree?" Jessica asked, a smirk on her face. "She already did. 3 times. I counted." Jessica clinked her glass against mine. "You know, you could end this charade any time. Steal Hannah's thunder at her own engagement party." "I'm not that cruel," I murmured. "It's not about cruelty, Abby," Jessica retorted, her voice firm. "It's about honesty. And self-respect." Before I could respond, Hannah spotted us and sailed over, Nathan in tow. "Jessica, have you met Nathan?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "And of course, you remember my little sister, Abby." Nathan extended his hand to me with a genuine, warm smile. "Hannah's told me about you. It's nice to finally meet." As we shook hands, I saw it. A flicker of something in his eyes. A slight narrowing. A moment of uncertainty. Did he recognize me? My heart rate quickened. But then, his expression cleared, and the moment passed. Abby works as an admin for some law office downtown, Hannah added dismissively, a little wave of her hand. Nathan probably knows more prestigious firms she could apply to, don't you, honey? Nathan, to his credit, gave me an apologetic glance. I'm sure Abby is quite capable of managing her own career, he replied, his tone gentle. Throughout the evening, Hannah continued making similar comments. Each one was a little needle, designed to establish the hierarchy she so desperately needed to maintain. Every time she mentioned my admin job, I noticed Nathan's increasingly puzzled expression, as if he was trying to place me. The tension in the air built steadily as dinner approached, and I wondered if I could possibly make it through the evening without the past colliding, spectacularly, with the present. Dinner was served at a long table set up on my parents' patio. The twinkling lights overhead cast a warm, almost magical glow against the evening sky. I was seated between my elderly grandmother and a distant cousin, while Hannah and Nathan, naturally, occupied the places of honor at the center of the table, beside our parents. The catered meal was exquisite. Hannah had made sure of that, and conversation flowed along with expensive wine. I was almost starting to relax when my father stood to make a toast. To Hannah and Nathan, he said, raising his glass, his voice filled with paternal pride. Hannah, you've always reached for the stars, and now you've found someone equally ambitious to share your life with. We couldn't be prouder. Hannah beamed, absolutely basking in the approval I'd rarely, if ever, experienced. After several more toasts, including a surprisingly heartfelt one from Nathan to his beautiful and passionate fiancé, Hannah stood up, commanding the table's attention. Nathan has some exciting news he's too modest to share, she announced, her eyes sparkling. Tell them, honey. Nathan looked uncomfortable, a faint blush on his cheeks, but he complied. It's not that big a deal, really, but I recently won a case against Bradford Pharmaceuticals. It was a team effort, really. He's being modest. Hannah interjected, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. It was a 7-figure settlement, and Nathan was lead counsel. The partners are already talking about fast-tracking him to senior partner. As impressed murmurs circulated the table, I recognized the case immediately. It had been assigned to another judge initially, but then transferred to my courtroom after Judge Brennan fell ill. I remembered Nathan's skillful arguments, his sheer professionalism. He'd earned that victory. He truly had. Hannah, high on attention and perhaps a little too much champagne, continued, her voice growing sharper. Nathan works with real judges and important clients every day. It's such meaningful work. Her eyes, then, found mine across the table, and I recognized the gleam in them. Here it comes, I thought, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Not everyone can handle high-pressure careers, though, she continued, a saccharine sweetness coating her words. Some people are better suited to supporting roles, right, Abby? The table's attention shifted, uncomfortably, to me. My cheeks burned. Abby's been an admin assistant for how long now, sweetie? For years? Hannah asked, feigning innocence. 3, I replied quietly, my voice barely a whisper. 3 years? Hannah repeated, as if this confirmed something deeply disappointing, something she'd known all along. Nathan, did you know my sister works at a law office? Maybe you've crossed paths? Nathan looked at me, a genuine spark of curiosity in his eyes. Which firm are you with, Abby? Before I could answer, Hannah laughed, a brittle, dismissive sound. Oh, Abby doesn't work at a firm. She's at the county courthouse, answering phones, or filing papers, or something. What exactly do you do all day, Abby? The table had gone uncomfortably quiet. My mother looked down at her plate, her face pale, while my father became suddenly, intensely interested in refilling his wine glass. Administrative support, I said evenly, the familiar lie bitter on my tongue. Hannah smiled triumphantly. See? Some of us were meant for greatness. Others for making coffee. But we need both types in this world, don't we? A few relatives chuckled awkwardly. Uncle Frank gave me a sympathetic, pitying glance. My grandmother patted my hand under the table, a silent message of comfort. Hannah, Nathan said quietly, a distinct note of warning in his voice. But Hannah was on a roll now, perhaps sensing Nathan's discomfort and misinterpreting it as embarrassment on her behalf. It's fine, Nathan. Abby doesn't mind. She's always been the quiet one. Happy to blend into the background. We can't all be overachievers. She raised her glass. To knowing your place in the world. The toast hung awkwardly in the air, few joining in. I felt my cheeks burning, not from embarrassment about my supposed position, but from pure, unadulterated anger at Hannah's deliberate cruelty and my parents' silent complicity. Nathan was looking at me intently now, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Matthews," he said slowly. "Abigail Matthews, from the county courthouse." Hannah beamed, pleased he was finally joining her narrative. "That's right, honey. Not everyone can argue important cases like you." Nathan shook his head slightly, still staring at me, a strange light in his eyes. "No, that's not—" He cut himself off. "Wait." His eyes widened suddenly, a flash of recognition. "You're not administrative support. You're the—" The moment hung suspended in time as Nathan's memory finally connected the dots. "Abby," he said carefully, his voice hushed. "What exactly is your position at the courthouse?" Every eye at the table turned to me. Hannah's smile remained frozen on her face, though confusion now clouded her eyes. My parents looked bewildered by the sudden shift in conversation. For 3 long years, I'd maintained this charade, swallowing my pride, letting my sister's dismissive comments slide. But in that moment, looking at Hannah's smug, triumphant expression, something inside me just broke free. I took a deep breath and met Nathan's gaze directly. "Judge," I said. The single word fell into a pool of silence, creating ripples of absolute confusion around the table. "What?" Hannah asked, her smile faltering, but not disappearing entirely. "Don't be ridiculous." Nathan's face had gone completely still, recognition dawning fully, undeniably. You're Judge Matthews," he said quietly. "Northern District Court." My grandmother's hand tightened around mine beneath the table. "That's impossible," Hannah said, looking frantically between Nathan and me, her voice rising slightly. "Abby's an administrative assistant. She's told us that for years." "I never actually said that," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. 3 years ago, I mentioned I was assisting Judge Thompson. Everyone assumed that meant as an assistant. I just never corrected the misunderstanding. I've appeared in her courtroom at least 6 times. Nathan continued, still processing this revelation, his voice awestruck. "Bradford Pharmaceuticals, that was your courtroom." My father sat his wine glass down with a resounding thud. You're a judge? An actual judge?" My mother's face had gone pale. "But that's not. You would have told us something like that." Around the table, relatives were exchanging shocked glances, whispering behind hands, reassessing every single interaction they'd ever had with me. "The youngest judge appointed to the district in 50 years. Nathan added, a note of pure respect in his voice. "I remember when the announcement was made. I just never connected that Judge Matthews was Hannah's sister." Hannah's face had transformed completely. Shock gave way to disbelief, then to raw, simmering anger. "This is absurd. You're making this up for attention." "I'm not," I said quietly. "She's not," Nathan confirmed. "Hannah, your sister presided over the Bradford case. She's highly respected in the legal community. Why wouldn't you tell us?" my mother asked, her voice small and hurt, tears welling in her eyes. I looked around the table at the faces of my family members, some confused, some impressed, some deeply embarrassed. "Would it have mattered?" I asked, my voice flat. "Hannah was always the star. My achievements never seemed to register." "That's not true," my father protested weakly, his eyes darting between us. "Isn't it?" I challenged, my voice rising slightly. "When I got into law school, you warned me about student loan debt. When I passed the bar, it was mentioned once at Sunday dinner and never again. I stopped sharing my successes because no one seemed interested." Aunt Patricia covered her mouth. "Oh dear. All those times I asked if you'd found a better job yet." Uncle Frank looked utterly mortified. "I told the judge of the Northern District Court that there was no shame in honest work." Under different circumstances, their reactions might have been comical. Hannah abruptly stood, her chair scraping loudly against the stone patio, a harsh, grating sound. "This is my engagement party," she hissed, her voice vibrating with rage. "And you're trying to steal the spotlight, as usual." "As usual?" I repeated incredulously, a bitter laugh escaping me. "When have I ever stolen your spotlight?" "You're lying," Hannah insisted, though doubt had finally crept into her voice, an unsettling tremor. "Nathan, tell them she's lying." Nathan stood slowly, placing a gentle, placating hand on Hannah's arm. "Hannah, she's not lying. Judge Matthews is well known in legal circles. I've argued motions in her courtroom numerous times. Hannah jerked away from his touch, looking absolutely betrayed. You knew! You knew and you didn't tell me? I didn't make the connection until just now. Nathan explained, his voice strained. Judge Matthews on the bench looks different. He gestured vaguely to my casual attire and loose hair. Black robe, hair back, I supplied, my voice devoid of emotion. Different context. My mother had started crying quietly, my father patting her hand mechanically while staring at me as if seeing a stranger. Cousin Jessica, who had been watching the scene unfold with poorly concealed satisfaction, finally spoke up. I went to her swearing-in ceremony. It was in all the legal journals. Youngest judge appointed to the Northern District in 5 decades. It was a big deal. And none of you thought to mention this to us? My father asked, looking around accusingly. She asked me not to, Jessica replied simply. Hannah was still standing, her face flushed with emotion, her eyes blazing. This is just perfect. Even at my engagement party, you found a way to make it about you. Hannah, Nathan said quietly, his voice firm. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed bitterly, a harsh, ugly sound. What's not fair is discovering my fiancé apparently knows my sister better than I do. What's not fair is having my special night ruined by some twisted revelation. With that, she threw her napkin on the table and stormed into the house. After an awkward moment, Nathan murmured an apology and followed her. The remaining guests sat in uncomfortable silence, the air thick with tension. My grandmother squeezed my hand again and whispered, I always knew you were destined for greatness, dear. My parents looked shell-shocked. My mother's makeup was streaked with tears. Why wouldn't you tell us something so important? She asked again, her voice cracking. Before I could answer, Uncle Frank cleared his throat. I think that's fairly obvious, Elizabeth. You and Robert never paid much attention to Abby's accomplishments. That's not true. My father protested, but his voice lacked conviction. The party effectively ended after that. Relatives made awkward excuses to leave, many stopping to congratulate me with a mixture of embarrassment and newfound respect. My parents remained at the table, looking dazed and uncertain. As the guests trickled away, Nathan returned to the patio, alone. Hannah's upset, he said unnecessarily. She's asked me to take her home. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. For what it's worth, he added quietly, his gaze steady. You're an excellent judge. Fair and thorough. The Bradford ruling was spot on. Thank you. I managed. He hesitated, then added, I'll talk to her when she calms down. This is a lot for her to process. After Nathan left, I found myself alone with my parents for the first time since the revelation. The 3 of us sat in silence as the catering staff discreetly cleaned up around us. I don't understand, my mother finally said. We've always been proud of you, Abby. Have you? I asked quietly, my voice barely a whisper. Because it never felt that way. We need time to process this, my father said, running a hand through his thinning hair. It's a lot to take in. I nodded, suddenly, completely exhausted. I should go. Neither of them protested as I gathered my things and left. The weight of 3 years of deception, and a lifetime of being overlooked, felt incredibly heavy on my shoulders. As I drove home to my empty apartment, I wondered if I had finally broken free, or simply created a deeper, irreparable rift in my already fractured family. The morning after Hannah's engagement party, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from extended family members, ranging from apologetic to utterly curious. 3 were from my parents, asking me to call them. None were from Hannah. I spent the day in a strange limbo, alternating between an immense sense of relief that my secret was finally out and a gnawing anxiety about the consequences. Part of me wanted to call Hannah, to reach out, but another part, the part that had endured years of her subtle put-downs, felt she needed to make the first move. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Nathan standing in my hallway, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Nathan? I said, surprised. Is Hannah with you? No, he replied, his voice low. She doesn't know I'm here. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. My apartment was modestly furnished but comfortable, with law books neatly arranged on bookshelves and a few landscape paintings brightening the walls. Nice place, Nathan commented, glancing around. Thank you. Would you like some coffee? He nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchen, grateful for the momentary distraction. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, Nathan was examining my law school diploma hanging on the wall. Columbia, he noted, impressed. Hannah went to NYU. I said automatically, then caught myself. The habit of deflecting praise by redirecting to Hannah was deeply ingrained, almost a reflex. Nathan took the coffee with a grateful nod. About last night, he began, his voice soft. I wanted to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. I cut him off gently. I feel like I do. I should have recognized you sooner. I shrugged. On the bench, I looked different. More severe. It's not just that, he said, sipping his coffee. Hannah had described you so differently that I never made the connection. She talked about her little sister who couldn't find her place, who needed protecting. Not exactly how I described Judge Matthews. I laughed, a humorless sound. Hannah has always needed to see me as less successful than her. It's how she defines herself, I think. In comparison to others. Nathan nodded slowly. I'm starting to realize that. He paused. She was up all night, you know. Alternating between crying and raging about how you humiliated her. I never intended to humiliate her. I said quietly, the words heavy. I couldn't take it anymore. I know, he said, his gaze meeting mine. For what it's worth, I think you showed remarkable restraint. Most people wouldn't have kept quiet about such an achievement for so long. We sat in silence for a moment before he continued. There's something else you should know. Hannah hasn't been entirely truthful about her own career. My eyebrows rose. What do you mean? She's not a marketing executive. At least, not in the way she's described it. Nathan explained, his voice gentle. She works in marketing, but she's a mid-level account manager, not a director. She hasn't led any major campaigns. The promotion she told everyone about at Christmas? It never happened. The revelation stunned me. Hannah had always seemed so confident about her accomplishments, so quick to share her successes. Why would she lie about that? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. I think she feels tremendous pressure to be exceptional. Nathan said carefully. She talks about your parents' expectations. About needing to be the successful daughter. Our parents put that pressure on her. Not me? I asked, feeling a strange twinge of sympathy for my sister despite everything. Did they? Nathan asked gently, turning the question on me. Or did Hannah put that pressure on herself? From what I've observed, your parents seem equally proud of both of you. Or they would be, if they knew the truth. His observation gave me pause. Had I misread the family dynamic all these years? Or had Hannah and I both been trapped in roles we'd created for ourselves? What happens now? I asked. Nathan sighed. I'm not sure. I care about Hannah deeply, but last night revealed some concerning aspects of our relationship that I need to think about. You're not reconsidering the engagement? I asked, alarmed. I don't know, he admitted. I love her, but the person I saw last night, the way she spoke to you, her reaction to the truth, that's not the woman I want to build a life with. She was shocked and embarrassed. I defended her, surprising myself. People say things they don't mean in those situations. Perhaps, he conceded, his voice quiet. But it revealed a pattern I can't ignore. The competitiveness, the need to put others down to feel superior. Those aren't qualities that disappear overnight. We talked for another hour about Hannah, about my career, about family dynamics. As he was leaving, Nathan turned at the door. For what it's worth, Judge Matthews, he said, his eyes kind, I think you're exceptional. Not because of your position or achievements, but because despite years of being overlooked, you've remained compassionate. Even now, you're defending the sister who never defended you. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, his words echoing in my mind. The truth was, despite everything, I loved Hannah. She was my sister. And underneath her competitive nature and desperate need for validation, I knew there was a vulnerable person who had perhaps suffered in ways I hadn't recognized. Later that afternoon, as I was reviewing case files for Monday's docket, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Hannah. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Without makeup and designer clothes, she looked younger, more like the sister I'd grown up with. Can I come in? She asked, her voice raspy. I stepped aside, closing the door behind her as she entered. Nathan came to see you, she said, not a question. Yes, I told her. He did. He also told me he thinks we should postpone the wedding. I winced. Hannah, I'm sorry. Are you? She asked, but without her usual bite. She sounded genuinely curious. Yes, I said firmly. I never wanted to hurt you or ruin your engagement. She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. Why didn't you tell us about being a judge? The question I'd been asked repeatedly since last night. Yet, coming from Hannah, it carried a different weight. Would it have mattered? I asked softly. She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. Of course, it would have mattered. You're my sister. A sister you've spent years belittling and dismissing. I pointed out, keeping my tone gentle. I never. She began automatically, then stopped herself. I didn't see it that way. How did you see it? She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking utterly exhausted. I don't know. I always felt like I had to be exceptional. Like anything less would be failing Mom and Dad. Our parents never put that pressure on us, I said, echoing Nathan's earlier observation. Didn't they? Hannah asked, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Maybe not directly, but it was always there. The expectations. The subtle disappointment when we didn't measure up. I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. I think we interpreted things very differently. I mused. Maybe, she conceded, her gaze distant. Or maybe they treated us differently. You were always the smart one. The responsible one. I was the pretty one. The social one. I felt like if I didn't excel at something, I had no value. Her words surprised me. Hannah, insecure? It seemed impossible, yet the vulnerability in her voice was unmistakable. So you lied about your job, I said gently. Nathan told me. She flinched. He had no right. Probably not, I agreed. But I understand why you did it. Do you? She asked bitterly. Miss Perfect Judge, who never needed validation. I needed validation. I corrected her, my voice firm. I just stopped expecting it from family after a while. The silence between us was heavy, thick with unspoken hurts and misunderstandings. Finally, Hannah spoke again. I'm not sure of who I am if I'm not the successful one, she admitted in a small, fragile voice. If I'm not exceptional. You don't have to be exceptional to be worthy, Hannah, I said. None of us do. She laughed humorlessly. Says the youngest judge in 50 years. That's what I do, Hannah, not who I am. Hannah looked at me for a long moment, truly seeing me. When did you get so wise? Probably around the same time you started pretending to be a marketing director, I replied, allowing a small smile. To my surprise, she laughed. A genuine laugh, a real one that I hadn't heard from her in years. For a moment, we were just sisters again, without the competition and resentment that had defined our relationship for so long. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted, her voice soft. With Nathan. With you. With everyone. Maybe start with honesty, I suggested. It's worked out okay for me so far. She nodded slowly, then stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. I am proud of you, Abby. I always have been. That's part of the problem, I replied. After she left, I sat alone again, wondering if this was the beginning of healing or simply a momentary truce in a lifetime of sibling rivalry. Either way, the truth was finally out. And there was no going back to the way things had been before. The week following Hannah's engagement party was a period of uncomfortable transition for the entire Matthews family. My parents called daily, alternating between heartfelt apologies for not recognizing my achievements and hurt questions about why I'd kept such important information from them. Extended family members sent congratulatory messages, years too late, many including awkward acknowledgments of how they'd misunderstood my career. Hannah and I maintained a cautious distance, communicating primarily through brief text messages. She was trying desperately to salvage her relationship with Nathan, who remained deeply troubled by the dynamics he'd witnessed at the engagement party. 10 days after the revelation, my mother called to invite me to Sunday dinner, a weekly tradition I'd been avoiding for months with various work excuses. Everyone will be there, she said, a note of pleading in her voice. Hannah, Nathan, your father and I, we need to talk as a family. I agreed reluctantly, knowing the conversation was necessary but dreading it nonetheless. Sunday arrived with a palpable sense of foreboding. I dressed carefully, in casual but professional attire, a subtle statement that this was who I truly was. As I drove to my parents' house, I rehearsed what I wanted to say, the boundaries I needed to establish. My father answered the door, embracing me awkwardly. "Abby," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Good to see you." The house smelled of my mother's pot roast, her standard Sunday dinner fare. In the living room, my mother was arranging flowers while Hannah sat stiffly on the couch. Nathan stood by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Abby's here," my father announced unnecessarily. My mother rushed over, hugging me tightly. "We're so glad you came," she whispered. Hannah offered a tight smile but didn't rise. Nathan nodded respectfully. "Judge Matthews." "Nathan, please," I corrected gently. "We're not in court. It's just Abby." Dinner was a tense affair, conversation limited to safe topics like the weather and neighborhood news. Only after my mother's apple pie was served did my father clear his throat significantly. "I think it's time we cleared the air," he said, looking around the table, his gaze sweeping over each of us. "As a family," my mother nodded in agreement. "We've all had time to process what happened at the engagement party. I think we need to talk honestly about why things reached that point." Hannah set her fork down with a sharp clink. "Fine. Let's talk about how Abby deliberately humiliated me at my own engagement party." "Hannah," Nathan warned quietly. "No, let's be honest," she continued, her voice rising. "You let everyone believe you were some struggling admin assistant for years, then dramatically revealed you're actually a judge at my engagement party. If that wasn't calculated to steal my spotlight, I don't know what is." "That's not what happened," I said evenly, my voice firm. "I never planned to reveal anything that night. You pushed and pushed, mocking my supposed career, until I couldn't take it anymore." "Girls," my mother interjected, her voice strained. "This isn't productive." "Actually, Elizabeth," my father said, surprising everyone by using my mother's first name at the dinner table. "I think they need to have this out." "We all do." Hannah glared at me across the table. "You've always been jealous of me." I laughed incredulously. "Jealous, Hannah? You're the one who spent years putting me down to make yourself feel better. Because you were always the smart one, the perfect one. Why can't you be more like Abby? Abby never gives us trouble. Abby always gets straight A's. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in your shadow?" Her words stunned me into silence. My parents looked equally shocked. "We never said those things," my mother protested weakly. "Maybe not in those exact words," Hannah snapped, tears welling in her eyes. "But the message was clear. Abby was the good daughter. I was the problem." "That's not true," my father insisted. "We've always been proud of both of you." "Really?" I asked, finding my voice again. "Because from where I was standing, Hannah was always the star. My achievements were afterthoughts compared to hers." "That's ridiculous," Hannah scoffed. "They threw a party when you got into Columbia. When I got into NYU, it was just, 'That's nice, dear.' They threw a dinner, not a party," I corrected, "and only after Aunt Susan suggested it. When you got that marketing internship, Dad called everyone we knew." My parents looked back and forth between us, bewildered, as if hearing these narratives for the first time. "We thought we were being fair," my mother said softly, her voice filled with regret. "Well, you weren't," Hannah and I said simultaneously, then stared at each other in surprise. Nathan, who had been silent throughout this heated exchange, finally spoke. "It seems to me that you both felt overlooked. Just in different ways." The simple observation cut through the tension, making us all pause. "Is that possible?" my father asked, looking genuinely confused. "That somehow made both of you feel like the less favored child?" Hannah and I exchanged glances. For the first time, I considered the possibility that my perception of our family dynamic might not be entirely accurate, or at least, might not be the only valid perspective.